You ready, Berlinda?
I am. It's 12:30.
Okay, I'm fixing to admit we got some out there.
Greetings and good afternoon. Welcome to today's Career Tip Tuesday. Now, before we begin, I have a couple of disclaimers. One is that you may not see a lot of students online, but let me assure you that this webinar is being recorded and it will be shared with students. Because our students are still in attending classes, so a lot of them are still in classes. We are going to ask all of our students, if you have questions, to please place them in the chat and also to complete the survey at the end. So we're going to ask all of our panelists today if they would introduce themselves, give their name, their company, and their role with the company. And we'll start with Ava.
So, good afternoon. My name is Ava Smith. I am an HR professional of about 30 years. I have two companies, actually. One is an HR consulting firm where I'm the outsourced HR manager, director, whatever they want to call me. But I also own a company called Flat Fee Recruiting where we do direct hire. So we help people and students find permanent positions. And I serve as the president and CEO of that.
All right. Thank you, Ava. Now, Brooke.
Hi, my name is Brooke Neely. I'm really happy to be here. I work for Ryder Transportation. I am a recruiter too. I've been with them about 8 years now. My background is in recruiting military to take part in training programs as they're transitioning out of the military. But recently I took on the role as our tech school coordinator. So I do the outreach to the tech schools across the United States, connecting with students, graduates, alumni, trying to help them get placed in our company if they're wanting to be a diesel technician, whether they have automotive or diesel background. I love what I do and I love communicating with the students. It's been a real pleasure and I look forward to this. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We thank you for being here. Now, Tad.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tad Gutchess, and I am Chief Operating Officer and President of HRP Associates. We are an environmental engineering and health and safety consulting firm. I've been with the company 37 years, but I have been involved in recruiting for 34 years, either as a technical person or a manager or a hiring agent, but I also currently oversee HR and our recruiting process, including interns and full-times for all 7 of our brick and mortar offices across the country. And I do have one daughter who recently graduated college, and I understand hopefully the trials and tribulations of what some folks are going through, and like to work with and mentor young folks, anybody really, to help further their careers.
Well, thank you all. Thank you all for being here. So we're going to start with our questions. What makes an applicant stand out in a large pool of applicants? And you can jump in, whoever wants to start.
Well, I don't know about the other recruiters, but I see hundreds of resumes. And so after a while, they all start looking alike. Outside of just having a good layout and things like that, what I recommend is a focus on timing. So sometimes people need to understand that when the resume comes in, it might be the 112th resume, not number 3. And so unfortunately, at some point, although we would love to hire everyone, we have to kind of cut things off. So I give them little tips and advice on doing things like connecting with people on LinkedIn and networking so that their resume gets to the top of the list on a one-on-one or a personal basis, instead of just only going through online platforms, because sometimes it is about the timing with your resume, not just some of the traditional things that we talk about as far as layout.
I agree with Ava. I was going to say it's very important because depending on the job, nowadays applications could go through an AI process where they're eliminated or kicked out. And I always say you want to try to find a connection, a human, work as hard as you can. And it really does not take much effort to go ahead and hook in with LinkedIn, learn something a little bit more about the person on the company or their company website. So fully support what Ava had said as well.
Well, I'll take a turn. I agree with you both, and I'm never stop learning. I'm always learning from other professionals. I have been in an HR capacity for quite a while. I've seen a lot of resumes, and I've recruited for different types of positions. So I like to say that it really just depends on what you're applying for, and the questions related, to their resume and application. No matter what you're applying for, what type of position, the thoroughness and attention to detail, I think is really important. I've seen all kinds of resumes from just LinkedIn perfection to just a bunch of bullet points, which in my profession recruiting for technicians, I'm not looking for that LinkedIn perfect resume with a format that's beautiful and stands out. I'm really looking for, did you take the time to proofread? Um, I'm looking to see that you are giving me some information on, your past experience. Although I'm looking for, technician experience, I look for things like, did they work at a fast food restaurant? So they've got customer service experience. They're able to make eye contact and connect with people. So, I tell people, really think about your past experience, and based on what job you're applying to, think about what they might be looking for. Some companies, that resume goes through a system and is looking for those keywords that are in the job description that you saw on Indeed or whatever, and it only pulls those resumes if you have those keywords met. Other companies don't require a resume. We're kind of going away from that a little bit now and looking more for complete applications and our screening questions, which are very thorough. And we ask that you fill those out thoroughly. So I think it's really important to see what that company, depending upon what you're applying for and what that company's looking for. In the trades, we are looking definitely for attention to detail, that you are taking your time with things, and also just the hands-on experience. Something else that I've started asking my students to think about in the technician field is, if you don't have a lot of job experience to add to the resume, make a section where you have bullet points of unpaid experience. So these technicians maybe grew up in their grandfather's garage, and they already know how to, replace a transmission, change all the spark plugs. They've, done this or that rebuild, and they didn't get paid for it because, their grandfather taught them and they learned how to do it, and they've been doing it for years. So I encourage them, if you don't have a lot of that experience from a paid job, go ahead and list things that you have done that pertain to that job and that require that type of experience, even though it was unpaid.
Well, thank you for those responses. That was a lot of varied information, but I'm sure our students will appreciate that. And some new information for me as well. So our next question, how can an applicant show that they are reliable and ready for the workforce?
First of all, they have to be good students, reliable students, and that they're on time for class. And sometimes when you're asking entry-level candidates, entry-level meaning people that are just getting started in their career, one of the questions that I ask them is, if I were to talk to your professors, what would they say about you? I've raised 3 children, and I've told them that the years that you're in school, that's your training. That's where you're setting your values on, like she said, attention to detail, being on time, communicating well. If your professors or your teachers can't speak highly of you before you join the workforce, that's an indicator that you're not necessarily ready, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree, Ava, that I would also say and add on there, if you're adding every references, those professors or references you give, what, obviously select folks that'll make a good opinion of you. What I like in a interview type setting is we want examples in real life, demonstrating that you're reliable. Give me a real life experience where you showed adversity back, and maybe the outcome was positive or it wasn't positive. How did you handle that? Very tough when you're looking at 120 resumes or even having interviews. So we're trying to get inside of you for really who you are. And a lot of times when we show someone who, even if they fail, I tell people all the time, either as an employee or someone with us, I actually want you to fail. And they're like, what are you talking about? Well, I want to see you how react, and I want to see that you have the quote stick to itiveness. I know probably not a official word, that you're going to keep on plugging away and fighting. And how can you show that? And either do that in writing in a resume, a little bit tougher to do that, but show that in an interview, even if you're not asked. You can bring up and lead questions. It always doesn't have to be question response in interview. You can lead.
I agree. That's great. I always, when I was coaching both the soldiers that were transitioning out of the military and also the students that are applying to some of our positions, they're interviewing with a hiring manager, which is the manager of the maintenance shop. They go through pre-screenings with us and on phone interviews with us before they get to that point. And I'm always doing a little bit of coaching just to help them prepare, because for some of them, it's their very first interview. And not to be discouraged, if they don't get that first one, when they get that first job, to remember, it's not, it's a stepping stone more than likely. You're going to be graduating into other positions, but learn as much as you can in each of those roles. When they are getting ready to apply, when we've already seen a resume and an application, I do coach them all the way to the point of arriving early to your interview. You don't account for traffic. These are young students that sometimes don't have that experience of having to be somewhere at a certain time across an uncharted road or a side of town. You don't know what you're going to encounter, so plan to be there early. You're interviewing from the time you first talk to me to the time you complete that in-person interview with the hiring manager. I also encourage them to learn about the company that they're interested in. Show that you have an interest in that company. Go to their website, learn a little bit about how long they've been around, how they got started, have they won any awards, and just look at where they are out there in the business world or the world of trades, and know a little bit about them. Often a question that's asked at an interview is, what do you know about us? And if you just say, well, I saw your ad online and applied, that's not going to go very far. So I encourage them to do a little research, and also just to have a couple questions. You are going to be doing primarily most of the answering to the questions, but have a couple questions, not necessarily with anything, to do with wages, salary, or anything like that, but just about the company, maybe about progression, how they, go about advancing you, and what are the opportunities for growth for your career and for continued education and learning to move up in the company. But just have a question or two available to show that you're really interested in your pathway.
Well, thank you all for confirming what we also share with students when we're speaking with them about their career search and beginning their employment. Now, on the next question I have for you is, what advice do you have for applicants who don't meet all of the listed qualifications? Should they still apply?
I think it depends. If we're looking for a mechanical engineer and you've only done daycare, please don't. We see that a lot, and it takes time to go through resumes. So, however, if it's a close call and you feel like, maybe I'm just missing the mark a little bit, don't assume that you are. One thing that's really important is to look at your transferable skills, because you might qualify more than you actually realize. I believe that my counterpart on the panel mentioned, you know, if I look at fast food, because I know that that means that they've done customer service, they can interface with people from the general public, and that might be, you know, part of the job. So, you know, don't discount yourself that way. The other thing is sometimes people do similar jobs, but they have different titles, and you don't recognize that that's what it is. And again, my counterpart who is helping the military personnel, it's a process to work with them because their title in the military and what they've done might mean one thing with that title. In the civilian world, it means something, it's titled differently, but it's almost the same job. So don't just assume that you don't have all of the skills. And if you know that you're missing one or two things, still don't count yourself out. I would say utilize cover letters and just acknowledge that, you know, I might not have this particular thing, but I'm familiar with it and I'll be more than happy to learn. And I'm a fast learner, as translated in my transcripts or something to that effect. You can, like he said, bring your voice to the table sometimes. It doesn't have to always just be a flat resume with bullets in hopes that somebody's gonna know what you're talking about.
Yes, I agree. I would say one thing that frustrates me the most, and I'll say it frustrates me with my daughter, and I see this with a lot of students, is if they don't match exactly how the ad is written, they do not apply. Totally agree with the daycare mechanical engineering analogy there, which is great. But a lot of times people get just sometimes they eliminate themselves. Go through the process and have that eliminate you. No one has ever come out of college and had all the skills to do every job. No one, 0% has happened. So you want to get close to strive for that. If someone asks for experience, say in CAD, and you don't have experience, but you took a class where you did it for a week and it was introduced in your skill set. Hey, I tried it, I liked it, I really wanted to do with it, but we only touched upon it for a week as part of the curriculum, but it's something I'm really interested in. Or I don't know the whole Office suite, but I took an Excel course on the outside, so I know a piece of that. So you can kind of play into that as far as if you don't meet the list of requirements. So I like to say, show where you're pushing forward in those areas where maybe you don't meet the listed requirements. But sometimes they're not. Sometimes people just don't write good ads and they make them generic. I mean, I hate to say it. And they try to get it out and hire that type of thing. But uh, yeah, I would push forward as much as you can and try to explain some of the gaps.
I like that. This is one of my favorite questions on here because we often get students, that have gone through their program, received the training from that program. They've got all the training and knowledge, but they don't have the hands-on experience. Some of our ads for technicians will list some skill sets we're looking for, and then sometimes they'll have in parentheses afterwards preferred. So they might not necessarily have that. We would prefer, that they already had a Class A CDL, but if they don't have one, don't not apply just because you don't. I also like to tell them that, how you interview and how you present yourself often can override the fact that you do not have the, 2 full years of work experience hands-on in that field. We talk to a lot of students. Not all of them are, rock stars and who we want to put into our shops across the country. But we talk to a lot of them that are just brand new. They're right out of school. They don't have that much hands-on experience other than the labs they did in school and maybe some time in their personal time working on vehicles. And they interviewed wonderfully. They arrived on time. They were enthusiastic. They have that mechanical mindset. You can tell they're passionate about what they do, and they carry themselves well. And you can just tell by spending that short amount of time with them that that's somebody you can continue to train and mold into the position. You can put them with an experienced person and have them be mentored. You can we have our own training program at our company. You can go ahead and get them into that training to get them up to that level that you are hiring for. So I would definitely say, look at all the requirements, look to see if they're preferred or they're definitely what they want. Think about what, like the others said, what you've done outside of work, maybe clubs you've been in, things you've been in charge of, things you've been responsible for. And think about that and use that in the interview to talk about, no, I don't have that particular experience you're looking for in that exact realm. But while I was in this club, I served as, the treasurer, and I handled this, and we won an award because of our club's, how we ran it and how well it was presented, and our membership. But think about the things you've done that can pertain to that. And like I said, if you can't come up with anything, focus on your good qualities, how well you speak, your eye contact, your enthusiasm about the opportunity to interview and be a part of this company. So don't discount yourself.
Well, thank you. That was all good to hear from an employer perspective. I'm sure that's going to benefit our students. Now, one other question. What is one red flag that would cause you hesitation in even considering an applicant?
Oh, the list goes on, but but the basics, like we said, showing up on time, being dressed appropriately, the way that you show up matters. You are your brand. And so the same way that you expect the company to show up a certain way, professional, engaging towards you and all of that, you have to do the same. It's always a red flag when, and the panelists mentioned that when we get resumes and there's typos on it. So it means that you don't pay attention to detail, or you try to use a template and you forgot to back out the part that says insert job here. Little things like that mean a lot. If you're a smoker and you don't have consideration on bringing sense inside of the workplace, and I'm sure they're going to tag on with other things, but on the front end, just walking in that door, the first impression really is a lasting impression, unless there's an emergency, of course, but generally speaking, it is. And those are things that are considered red flags, because as HR people, that doesn't just translate to us on how you're going to interview or if you're going to get the job. It translates on what type of employee you're going to be moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
I would say a red flag for me, especially, and I just experienced this this morning, is looking at a resume is undefined or unexplained gaps of time in a resume, or short-term employment. There's a reason for everything. Sometimes folks only think that professional jobs and things like that need to be put on there. For instance, we talked a little bit about the characters outside of what you're applying for. A lot of times I've seen folks who had to leave school early and take care of an elderly person, or someone in the family had cancer and they were the ones who were driving them to and back services and things like that, or they were helping out the elderly, or different reasons for this. To me, that actually bumps you up because you're struggling, or all of a sudden you had to not go to school full time and you had to work to help support yourself. But also, what is the reason by we have a lot of folks that we work with, and it's like, geez, what happened to your definition of the short-term employments? Well, they don't explain well on the resume that the company got bought out 3 times, but it looks like 4 different jobs. So it wasn't really written well when they did that, or maybe the company went bankrupt, or they would just didn't select, or it was a contract position, that type of. So there's a lot of reasons for explaining, because it gets back to the respectfulness, the dependency, the accountability that we're looking for on a day-to-day basis. So we like to see all the gaps of time be explained, and it's a red flag if there's large gaps there.
With our company, and with my role in the trades, I'll speak to that. you know, we are looking for people who the attention to detail is important. And I understand we're also working with a lot of very young new graduates that come out of you know, an 18-month trade program or something of that nature, and they're young, and this is all new to them. I often take the opportunity to have them redo a resume I get before it makes it to the hiring manager, because, you know, like you had mentioned, they forgot to delete, you know, insert this here, or they didn't have things spelled correctly or lined up correctly. Not that we're looking for a really, you know, unique, perfect format. We're looking for, you know, spelling correct and grammar correct, but we're looking for that experience. If there's not a lot of experience listed, I like to talk to them again about adding those areas of non-paid experience. But some red flags would be the biggest one that I hear about from our hiring manager is the candidate shows up late. A lot of times our hiring managers, you know, we have nearly 800 maintenance shops across the country. A lot of them will give them a second chance. You know, you know, if they've got some sort of excuse, whatever it may be, that sounds legitimate, we'll give them that second opportunity. Some won't. So I just think arriving on time is just so important. That it shows how serious you're taking it, that you're going to show up for your shift on time. We don't necessarily look for applicants to come into the interview in a suit. You know, you're interviewing for a diesel mechanic position in a trade, but coming to the interview well put together. You know, your shirt is tucked in. Your best clothes might be, you know, a pair of khakis and a shirt, and you're, you know, it's tucked in, you're ironed, you know, no wrinkles, and you're as well as you can be presented. That I think that counts for a lot. We have a lot of interviewees that come in and they look great. You know, they've got some grease in their cuticles and under their nails, but you know, that's that's hard to get out. You're coming in as a diesel mechanic, and that is certainly not scrutinized. But just being as well put together as you can be and being on time, so important. Red flags, we kind of pretty much, by the time they come in for an interview, they've gone through several screenings, even a motor vehicle records check. And I'd like to say this while I have the opportunity, that if there are any students out there that are going to apply and work for a company in a trade capacity where you operate heavy equipment, machinery, vehicles, by going into that particular field, you're deciding that your lifestyle is not going to include illegal substances and substances that can impair your ability to perform on the job. So you are choosing that job knowing that you will be drug tested prior to being hired and randomly drug tested. So you're choosing that profession instead of that lifestyle. Secondly, your driving record is worth gold. If you're going into any type of trade where you might have the opportunity to, like I said, operate heavy equipment or drive a van or a truck or something, forklift, anything, your driving record means everything to you. That means always, even outside of work, leaving early to get places so you don't have to speed to get there on time. Multiple speeding tickets, at-fault accidents, those will disqualify you from working for us in that capacity. So, you know, pay attention to things like that, driving record, you know, and the young students sometimes are often lead foots and have sports cars and that kind of thing. But, you know, if you're choosing this profession, or any profession, and those types of things are scrutinized, you know, you're making a choice there not to participate that in your lifestyle. And I like to say that as often as I can, because we get a lot of wonderful candidates that don't make it past some of those screenings. And it's devastating. It's so disappointing and devastating, because they're everything we need, everything we were looking for, but that, you know, that knocked them out of the running. So I don't miss a chance to say something about that.
Thank you all for those responses. I had to snicker when Ava was talking about, leaving insert here on the resume, because we do see those here in the Career Center. So, but it's kind of new expecting, for an employer, knowing that an employer would get that. So, okay, thank you. Well, we're running short on time. It's about the end of our time today. And this has been so good. I wish it were longer, but I have a final question for each of you. And that question is, what is one bit of advice that you would give students preparing to begin their career?
I would say a couple of things. First of all, when you're in an interview, one of the questions that should be asked is, can you describe your company culture? None of us want you to be a turnover rate. And so if the culture is not one that you're going to thrive in, you don't want to apply there, because you don't want to have, all these jobs show up on your resume because you could do the job, it just wasn't a cultural fit. And I would say make sure you give the impression, not that you're there looking for a job, but that you're looking for the job. There is a difference. So when that employer feels like you're looking for a place to call home, dig in your heels, grow, be there for the long haul, it gives you, an edge on their hiring decision.
I agree. It's about a career, not a job. So my advice would be volunteer. Once you have a job as a young person, volunteer at work. I'll take that on. I'll give that a try. Don't be afraid to fail. Try new things. Differentiate yourself. Step up and don't be afraid to step into places that maybe are uncomfortable for you. A lot of folks do not do that. And I guess the only other thing is, when we talk about on time, in my world, on time means 10 minutes early. There's never a person who gets the business if they're early. Everybody remembers those that are late. So if you're 10 minutes early to everything, it allows you a little buffer time to brush yourself off, go to the restroom, wash your hands, whatever you do. But also waiting outside the store, it lets people know that you're ready and ready to go. So use that for the rest of your life for everything. 10 minutes early, everything you do.
I agree with that 100%. I think if I had to give one piece of advice, all of what you both just said, so very important. I agree 100%. Something else is, because you're new at this, maybe you're venturing out into your first career, not your last, but your first career after graduating, and you haven't interviewed much. Maybe in school you weren't in many clubs or never ran for anything, had to make any kind of presentation or anything. Practice talking to others before you come into an interview. Do mock interviews. If your school provides that opportunity, do it as much as you can. Practice your 30-second elevator speech, where you talk about yourself and your goals and where you see yourself. But get comfortable talking to people you don't know. Practice in the mirror. Practice sample questions. But if you've got that opportunity to, with a career counselor, a teacher, a group of friends even, practice talking to them, in a professional manner, and have them critique you. What were you doing with your hands? How are you sitting? Did you make eye contact? Did you fumble with your words, or, did you speak clearly? But get comfortable talking to others, because, that interview, you want to make a great impression. There's so many different things you can do to prepare, knowing about the company and everything of that nature, but practicing so that when you get in there and you're nervous, and that means you care. That's a good thing, to be nervous. You care about getting the job and making a good impression, but relieve some of that nervousness by having done it before, being comfortable with, having spoken to someone before in that capacity. So practice and take advantage of any mock interview opportunity your school might offer.
Thank
I
you.
want to tag on to what she said about practice, because part of the nervousness is you don't know what they're going to ask you. It's a wonderful thing for you just to take the job description, you can drop it into AI, and you can literally say, what are some potential questions that a company might ask me about this particular position? Now you've got a sheet in front of you And now you can think about your answers and then you can practice how to convey all the things that she's talking about. So that's just an added tip.
I like that. That's a great idea.
Thank you, Ava. We do share that with students as well. Yeah, it's a good tip. Thank you all for being here today. I know we went over just a little bit. I don't see any questions in the chat. But if the students that we have on, if you have any questions, I'll give you a minute to put a question if you have one in the chat. And please remember to complete the survey. That's already included in the chat. But we thank all of our panelists for being here today. It was great hearing what your perspective was on these questions. Some we already knew. There were a few new things that were added for us, so it was good for us as well. So we appreciate you agreeing to be here today.
It's our
And
pleasure.
I don't see
Thank
any.
you for having me.
You're welcome.
Yes.
I don't see any further questions, so
Okay.
meeting is adjourned.
All right.
Thank you all.
Best
Have a
wishes.
wonderful-
All right.
Good luck to you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.